Have you ever stopped to think that some of the most dangerous people you've ever met might not be the ones you expected? Empaths, known for their deep sensitivity and ability to absorb the emotions of others, possess a quiet power that can transform any environment. But behind this empathy, there is a strength that few understand. In this video, we'll uncover what really makes empaths so powerful and sometimes dangerous. We will explore how your incredible ability to read and sense the energies around you can be used to influence, protect, and, when necessary, defend yourself in almost invisible ways. Welcome to the Eye of the Soul channel. Empaths have a rare ability to feel the emotions of others as if they were their own. It is not just an ordinary empathy, but a sensory perception that allows them to absorb feelings that are often hidden. This ability can be both a blessing and a burden, as by connecting emotionally with others, they can be influenced in profound and involuntary ways. The presence of an empath in a room can create a welcoming atmosphere, as they tend to be very understanding and sensitive to the emotional needs of others. However, this same ability can bring problems. The danger arises when an empath, conscious or not, becomes a kind of emotional mirror, reflecting and amplifying the emotional state of those around them. This can create a significant emotional influence on those close to you, which in some situations can lead to unintentional manipulation. Imagine being close to someone who constantly absorbs and reflects your emotions. This can generate emotional dependence, in which the person feels that the empath is indispensable to their emotional well-being, without realizing that this process can be exhausting for both parties. The issue is not limited to just absorbing negative emotions. Empaths can also transmit emotional states unconsciously, generating a chain effect. When they are at peace, they tend to radiate this tranquility, but when they are overwhelmed, their negative emotions can also impact others. This can make it difficult for those around them to distinguish between their own emotions and those being influenced by the empath. This emotional overlap can create a vicious cycle in which those involved get lost in a spiral of feelings that are not genuinely theirs. Empaths' emotional complexity can also make their own lives difficult. By constantly absorbing other people's energies and emotions, they can lose track of where their own feelings begin and others' feelings end. This emotional confusion can lead to burnout, anxiety, and even depression. The line between genuine empathy and emotional exhaustion is fine, and many empaths don't realize when they've crossed that line, damaging their mental and emotional health. Another interesting aspect is the fact that empaths tend to become targets of people seeking emotional comfort. Their ability to understand what others are feeling makes them excellent listeners and counselors, but it can also attract individuals who, consciously or unconsciously, exploit this ability. This can generate toxic relationships where the empath constantly gives more than they receive, leading to emotional exhaustion and an imbalance in energy exchange. Empaths have an interesting characteristic: the emotional chameleon effect. This means they can adapt their emotions to fit the environment around them. This ability makes them easy to connect with, as they seem to deeply understand what others are feeling and often mirror those feelings. It's as if they adjust their emotional vibration according to what is needed in each situation, whether to calm someone in a moment of distress or to celebrate together on a happy occasion. This emotional adaptability can also be an unconscious defense mechanism. By mirroring the emotions of others, empaths can avoid conflict or confrontation, as they rarely impose their own emotions on the environment. However, this constant adjustment can, over time, create a disconnection with your own feelings. An empath who constantly adjusts their emotions to their environment may lose track of who they really are or what they really feel. This can lead to a feeling of emptiness or inner confusion. Furthermore, the emotional chameleon effect can be a powerful form of persuasion. When an empath mirrors another person's feelings, it creates a sense of trust and understanding, which can make it easier to build relationships and alliances. However, this ability can be used in a manipulative way, even unconsciously. If an empath understands that, by mirroring emotions, they can influence someone's behavior, this can pave the way for a subtle form of emotional control. Empaths, in this context, can exert a great influence on group dynamics. By adjusting their emotions to harmonize with their surroundings, they can shape the emotional climate of an entire group. If they are calm and balanced, they can bring serenity to a tense situation. On the other hand, if they are anxious or insecure, these emotions can easily spread, negatively affecting everyone around them. This ability to influence the environment makes them key players in teams and social groups, but it also places the responsibility on them to manage their own emotions consciously. The true complexity of this chameleon effect lies in the fine line between adaptation and manipulation. Empaths may unknowingly use this ability to direct the outcomes of social interactions, adjusting their emotions to gain trust, curry favor, or shape opinions. Although this is often not a deliberate intention, repeating this behavior can create a subtle form of emotional manipulation, where those around them feel inclined to act in a specific way because of the empath's emotional influence. Emotional vampire syndrome is a phenomenon that can affect many empaths. Their ability to absorb the emotions and energies of others causes them to sometimes act as emotional sponges. In situations where they are surrounded by negativity, the empath absorbs these dark emotions, which can lead to physical and mental exhaustion. This process, although often unconscious, can become a dangerous cycle, especially in close relationships where the empath can become overly dependent on the emotional support of others. The true complexity of this syndrome arises in the energy imbalance between the empath and the people around them. When an empath absorbs other people's negative emotions, they inevitably carry that weight with them, affecting their own emotional state. This can create an unbalanced exchange, where the empath continues to provide emotional support without receiving it in return. Eventually, this process can completely exhaust the empath, leaving them emotionally drained. For those around the empath, this dynamic can be equally complicated. People who constantly share their feelings with empaths may begin to feel dependent on that relationship, unconsciously feeding off the empath. While this is not necessarily intentional or malicious behavior, it can result in a cycle where the empath is seen as a constant source of comfort and support, but their own emotional needs end up being neglected. In a relationship, emotional vampire syndrome can manifest itself in many ways. An empath may feel that it is their responsibility to care for their partner emotionally, absorbing the other's tensions, worries, and sadness. This can lead to a dynamic in which the empath feels trapped, as if they are trapped in a cycle of always trying to save the other emotionally. Meanwhile, the other person may become accustomed to this dynamic, often without realizing the negative impact it has on the empath. The danger here lies not only in emotional exhaustion, but also in the way this dynamic can affect the empath's mental health. When constantly drained by the emotions of others, the empath may begin to experience feelings of depression, anxiety, and even hopelessness. This can harm his ability to maintain healthy, balanced relationships, as he may lose the ability to separate his emotions from the emotions of others. Intuition is one of the most impressive abilities of empaths. They have a unique ability to read the emotions, feelings, and intentions of the people around them almost automatically. This sensitivity allows them to notice subtle cues that others might overlook, such as changes in tone of voice, facial expressions, or body language. By storing this emotional information, empaths are able to build an internal map of people's emotions, which gives them a powerful advantage in their social and professional interactions. However, this capacity for intuition can also be used in strategic and even manipulative ways. Empaths can, often without realizing it, use their ability to predict how others will react emotionally in certain situations. This prediction puts them in a position of power, as they know exactly how to approach a person to get what they want or avoid conflict. By adjusting their words or actions according to perceived emotions, they can influence the behavior of those around them in subtle ways. Empaths' stored intuition can also be a means to self-protection. By anticipating the emotions of others, they are able to avoid emotionally draining situations, withdrawing before the environment becomes toxic. However, this same ability can create a barrier between the empath and those around them. By always being one step ahead emotionally, empaths can become suspicious or defensive, avoiding getting deeply involved for fear of being emotionally overwhelmed. An interesting aspect of empaths' intuition is that they can often sense when something is wrong, even when the other person tries to hide their emotions. This realization can be uncomfortable for those who prefer to keep their emotions private, as empaths tend to bring up feelings that other people would prefer not to discuss. This can create tension in relationships, as the person feels emotionally unmasked, even if the empath has no intention of invading their emotional space. In a work environment, for example, this intuition can be an advantage. Empaths can use their ability to better understand dynamics between colleagues or to predict how a decision might affect the emotional state of the team. However, using this intuition in manipulative ways, such as choosing words that directly tap into someone's emotional vulnerabilities, can be dangerous. This can lead to a form of covert control, where the empath influences the behavior of others without them realizing it. The emotional contagion effect is a common characteristic among empaths, being one of the most powerful forms of influence they can exert on a group. Empaths have a unique ability to propagate their own emotions involuntarily, affecting the mood and attitudes of everyone around them. This happens because they not only absorb the emotions of others, but also radiate them, which can create a chain reaction in social settings. Thus, an empath can effortlessly change the dynamics of a group with just their emotional presence. This effect can be extremely beneficial when the empath is in a positive emotional state. Your tranquility and serenity can calm a tense environment, bringing harmony and peace to situations that could easily turn into conflicts. At family gatherings, at work, or in social groups, an emotionally balanced empath can be the key to maintaining stability and well-being for everyone. They create an atmosphere of emotional safety where people feel they can express their feelings without fear of judgment. On the other hand, when an empath is emotionally overwhelmed or in a negative state, the contagion effect can become harmful. Emotions like anxiety, sadness, or anger can spread quickly in a group, especially when the people around are emotionally sensitive. This creates a kind of emotional contamination, where the empath's mood permeates the environment and directly impacts everyone's emotional state. The effect can be so strong that, in some cases, people cannot identify the source of their discomfort, but feel that the environment is heavy and uncomfortable. Empaths' sensitivity to their environments also makes them susceptible to reverse emotional contagion. When they are surrounded by negative people, their emotions can be easily influenced, generating a continuous cycle of absorbing and spreading negative emotions. This can be exhausting and lead to emotional exhaustion, especially if the empath is not aware of how these dynamics work and how to protect their own emotional energy. In social groups, empaths can become emotional leaders, even without meaning to. Their ability to capture and influence emotions can place an invisible responsibility on them. People expect them to maintain the balance and well-being of the group, even if this is not verbalized. However, this can become a burden, as the empath may feel like they are always looking out for the emotional state of others, often at the expense of their own balance. To avoid the negative aspects of the emotional contagion effect, empaths need to develop strategies for managing their own emotions and remaining aware of the impact they are having on others. This includes learning to disconnect emotionally when necessary and not carrying the emotional responsibility of an entire group. When balanced, empaths can be positive forces of emotional change, radiating calm and understanding to everyone around them. The difficulty of setting limits is one of the biggest vulnerabilities of empaths. Because they are so connected to the emotions of others, they often struggle to differentiate between what is their own feeling and what has been absorbed from someone else. This emotional confusion can lead them to get involved in situations where they sacrifice excessively, neglecting their own needs to meet those of others. This behavior, over time, can become harmful, as the empath often forgets to set aside time for self-care. Establishing healthy emotional boundaries is crucial for anyone, but for empaths, it's a matter of emotional survival. When these boundaries are not clear, they can end up in toxic or codependent relationships where they are constantly sucked out of their emotions. An empath who cannot impose barriers ends up absorbing not only the emotions, but also the problems and responsibilities of others, feeling emotionally overwhelmed. The lack of adequate boundaries can make the empath become the target of people who, consciously or unconsciously, take advantage of their sensitivity. The inability to set boundaries can also lead to emotional manipulation, both on the part of the empath and those around them. When an empath becomes too involved in the emotions of others, they may end up manipulating the situation without realizing it, trying to control the emotional state of others for their own relief. Likewise, people around them may begin to depend on the empath for constant support, exploiting their ability to feel and absorb emotions, without worrying about reciprocating the emotional care they receive. In personal relationships, this difficulty in imposing limits can generate patterns of codependency. The empath may feel that it is their responsibility to save the other, even if it means sacrificing their well-being. These relationships tend to be unbalanced, with the empath always giving more than they receive. In the long run, this can lead to feelings of resentment and burnout. The empath may feel trapped in situations where they are constantly taking care of the emotional needs of others, with no room for their own needs to be met. In a professional context, this lack of limits can be equally harmful. Empaths often take on more responsibilities than they can handle, especially in work environments where there are many emotional demands. They may feel pressured to help everyone around them, becoming emotional problem solvers. However, this often comes at the expense of your own productivity and well-being, as the emotional energy needed to manage your own tasks is compromised. Empaths are extremely susceptible to emotional overload as they intensely absorb the energies and feelings of those around them. This ability to capture and internalize emotions means that, in tumultuous or emotionally charged environments, the empath quickly feels overwhelmed. They do not have a natural filter that protects them from these influences, and end up becoming emotional sponges, which can lead to a state of exhaustion. This type of overload can generate physical symptoms such as fatigue, headaches, and even sleep disorders, as the mind and body are unable to process so much emotional information simultaneously. This overload can be especially evident in crisis situations. When surrounded by people who are suffering or experiencing difficulties, empaths often feel compelled to absorb the suffering, even without wanting to. This can lead them to a state of intense stress, as they not only carry their own challenges, but also the emotional problems of others. Over time, this accumulated charge can make them emotionally volatile, generating unpredictable reactions in moments of tension, such as outbursts of anger or crying spells. In work contexts, or large social events where there are many people and many emotions circulating, empaths can feel extreme emotional overload. The presence of many different energies at the same time can make them feel overwhelmed and unable to concentrate or relax. This can affect your ability to make clear, rational decisions, as the tangle of conflicting emotions interferes with your perception and judgment. To deal with this overload, empaths need to find ways to emotionally switch off in environments where there is an excess of stimuli. The problem of emotional overload also manifests itself in your closest relationships. Empaths have a tendency to internalize the emotions of their partners, family members, or friends so deeply that they can lose track of their own feelings. In moments of conflict, they may feel guilty or responsible for the negative emotions of others, burdening themselves with an emotional responsibility that is not theirs. This can lead to a cycle of self-sacrifice, where the empath constantly puts the emotional needs of others above their own, resulting in burnout. Another consequence of emotional overload is that empaths can develop a state of emotional hyperalertness. They become so accustomed to absorbing the emotions of others that they become overly sensitive to any change in the environment. This can generate a constant state of anxiety, where the empath is always waiting for the next emotional breakdown or conflict. This state of emotional vigilance is extremely exhausting and over time can lead to conditions such as depression or burnout, especially if the empath does not know how to protect themselves from this overload. To avoid this overload, it is essential that empaths practice emotional self-management. This involves creating emotional protection rituals, such as spending time alone to recharge your energy or practicing meditation techniques to release accumulated emotions. The savior complex is another common trait among empaths, who often feel compelled to help others at any cost. Their deep connection to the emotions of others creates a sense of responsibility to alleviate people's suffering, which can lead to self-sacrificial behavior. This desire to save others, while often well-intentioned, can become harmful, both for the empath and the people they try to help. The empath ends up assuming a protective role, even in situations where the other person needs to face their own challenges. The problem arises when the empath becomes too involved in other people's issues, often neglecting their own needs and limits. They may be drawn into relationships with people who are in constant emotional crisis, believing that it is their job to fix or heal the other. This can create an unbalanced dynamic where the empath is always providing emotional support, but rarely receives the same in return. This cycle of constant helping can lead to burnout, as the empath does not have the time or space to take care of themselves. Furthermore, the savior complex can impede the personal growth of people who are being saved. When the empath constantly intervenes to alleviate the suffering of others, they rob those people of the opportunity to learn from their own experiences. Instead of allowing them to face and overcome their difficulties, the empath deprives them of the chance to develop resilience and self-reliance. This can generate a cycle of emotional dependence, where the person being helped becomes unable to deal with their own problems without the empath's constant support. This need to save others can also have deep roots in the empath himself. Often, this compulsion comes from a feeling of internal emptiness or the need to feel useful and valued. When helping others, the empath may be unconsciously seeking to fill their own emotional gaps. However, this search for external validation rarely results in lasting satisfaction. Instead, the empath may feel even more exhausted and emotionally drained as they are constantly investing their energy into other people's issues without taking care of their own needs. Another risk of the savior complex is that it can attract people who take advantage of kindness and excessive empathy. Manipulative individuals can quickly identify that the empath is willing to sacrifice themselves to help and end up exploiting this willingness. This can lead to toxic relationships, where the empath finds themselves trapped in a dynamic of constantly giving, while the other person continues to demand more and more without offering anything in return. This emotional exploitation can lead to deep burnout and a feeling of being constantly used. To break this cycle, empaths need to learn to balance their compassion with healthy boundaries. It is important that they understand that helping others does not mean taking responsibility for other people's problems. True help often involves allowing people to face their own difficulties, offering support without taking it upon themselves to solve everything. Recognizing this difference is essential to avoid emotional exhaustion and build more balanced and healthy relationships. Empaths also have a unique ability to detect when someone is being dishonest or trying to hide something. This emotional sensitivity makes them able to notice subtle signs of inconsistency, such as small changes in tone of voice, body language, or facial expressions. In many cases, they can sense the discomfort or emotional tension of a person who is trying to hide the truth. This gives empaths a natural radar for lies, which can be an advantage in many situations, but can also pose challenges when it comes to dealing with truths that are not always easy to confront. This ability to sense the truth goes beyond detecting obvious lies. Empaths can often sense the unexpressed feelings behind a person's words. Even if someone tries to mask their true thoughts, empaths can pick up on the dissonance between what is said and what is felt. This makes them great at understanding complex situations or identifying repressed emotions that others may miss. However, this realization can be disconcerting for those who prefer to keep certain feelings or intentions hidden. This heightened perception of truth can cause discomfort in relationships. People around an empath often feel exposed or vulnerable, as their emotions and intentions can be read without them wanting them to. This can lead to distancing, as some people may avoid being around someone who can see beyond what is said. The truth, when revealed without preparation, can be painful, and empaths need to learn to deal with this sensitivity carefully, knowing when the right time is to bring certain truths to the surface. On the other hand, this effectiveness of truth can also be a healing factor in deeper relationships. Empaths, through their ability to understand underlying emotions, can help people confront their own truths in a gentle and compassionate way. By providing a safe space for others to express how they truly feel, empaths can promote emotional healing and strengthen relationships. This is especially important in contexts where the truth is repressed or ignored, as the empath's ability to detect the truth can serve as a catalyst for emotional honesty. However, the realization of the truth is not always welcome. In some situations, empaths may find themselves in ethical dilemmas about what to do with the truths they detect. Revealing the truth is not always the best choice, especially if it will cause more harm than good. This is a fine line that empaths need to learn to walk, balancing their sensitivity with the need to preserve relationships and social contexts. Knowing when to silence or soften your perceptions is just as important as knowing when to share what you perceive. Emotional manipulation is a significant risk for empaths, especially when their emotional skills are not used consciously. Because of their deep understanding of others' emotions, empaths can influence other people's feelings and behaviors in subtle and effective ways. This influence can be exerted involuntarily, but it can also be intentional in some cases, resulting in a form of emotional control that goes unnoticed. The ability to predict and respond to the emotional states of others places the empath in a position of power that, if misused, can harm the relationships and emotional well-being of everyone involved. Empaths have the ability to adjust their behavior to elicit specific reactions from those around them. They instinctively know what to say or do to calm, please, or influence others, taking advantage of their keen perception of emotional needs. If an empath notices that someone is vulnerable, they can use this information to steer the conversation or situation in their favor. Although it is not always conscious manipulation, this type of behavior can shape the behavior of others, creating a dynamic where the empath has emotional control. In more extreme situations, the empath can use their ability to read emotions to manipulate entire groups. By understanding the emotional dynamics of a collective, the empath can subtly influence everyone's mood and decisions without them realizing it. This can be particularly dangerous in professional or social contexts, where emotional manipulation can affect group harmony or lead to decisions that only favor the empath. The ability to influence mass emotions is a responsibility that, if used selfishly, can cause great emotional harm to those involved. Another important aspect of emotional manipulation is that, in some cases, empaths can become victims of their own need to please others. They may feel compelled to constantly adjust their emotions and behaviors to avoid conflict or to maintain harmony in their relationships. Over time, this tendency can result in a form of self-sabotage, where the empath sacrifices their own emotional needs to ensure the well-being of others. Although the initial intention may be to avoid the suffering of others, the end result is that the empath may find themselves trapped in a web of self-imposed emotional manipulation. Emotional manipulation can also create a cycle of dependence in interpersonal relationships. People around an empath may begin to depend on them to balance their emotions, becoming emotionally dependent on their presence and guidance. This dependency can be exploited by the empath, consciously or unconsciously, to maintain control over the relationship. This creates a dynamic where the empath becomes indispensable and others begin to rely excessively on their ability to resolve their emotional issues, resulting in an unbalanced and often toxic relationship. It is critical that empaths are aware of their tendency toward emotional manipulation, even when it is unintentional. Developing self-awareness about the impact of your actions and learning to use your emotional sensitivity ethically is essential to maintaining healthy and balanced relationships. By recognizing the power they have over the emotions of others and choosing to use it constructively, empaths can avoid the dangers of emotional manipulation and foster genuine, honest connection with those around them.